Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. So GDP is slowing all over the world, every country. Productivity has been waning for 20 years, all over the world. Unemployment is stubbornly high in every country. We are beginning to see the long end game for one of the great economic eras in world history. But we're also beginning to glimpse the emergence of a new economic paradigm so different than anything that we have ever known that it's going to catch our breath, and then we're going to have to think it out. To understand the nature of this crisis and the opportunity that's now unfolding, we need to grasp how the great economic changes in history occur. If we know how they occur, we can get a roadmap for what we need to do in the business community to chart a new journey for the human race tomorrow morning. When we look at all the great economic paradigm shifts in history, they share a common denominator. At a particular moment in time, three defining technologies emerge and converge to create what we call in engineering a general-purpose technology platform, a new infrastructure for changing the way we organize economic life with each other and the planet we live in. What are those three defining technologies? New communication technologies to more efficiently manage economic activity. New sources of energy to more efficiently power economic activity. New modes of transportation logistics to more efficiently move economic activity. When communication technologies, new energies, and new modes of transportation come together, they change the way we manage, power, and move economic activity across our value chains. From an anthropological point of view, it's as simple as that. Let me give you an example. 19th century, first industrial revolution, Britain. The Brits took us from manual printing, a German invention, to steam power printing. Big leap forward in communication, the ability to manage economic life. Then they built out the telegraph across Britain. The Brits then went to a new energy source, cheap coal, and they created an invention to power it, the steam engine. Then they put the steam engine on rails called locomotives and created a transport system that opened up world markets in the first industrial revolution. Communication, energy, transport, logistics. 20th century, second industrial revolution, United States and Germany. In the United States, like in Germany, we had centralized electricity, and then Alexander Graham Bell gave us the telephone. We think the internet's a big deal. The telephone as a management tool for communications, for economic activity, a huge leap forward. Later, radio and television. These communication technologies converged in the United States with cheap Texas oil wells, powered by a new invention, the internal combustion engine, a German invention, Daimler and Benz. And then Henry Ford put everybody on roads, cars, buses, and trucks on road systems. The US, Germany, second industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution took us through the 20th century, and it peaked in July of 2008. If you go back and remember that month, Brent crude oil hit a record $147 a barrel on world markets. And when that happened, everyone stayed home because all the prices for everything we buy were prohibitively high because everything's pegged to fossil fuels, fertilizers, pesticides, construction materials, pharmaceutical products, synthetic fiber, all made out of carbon. Transport, power, heat, and light. This whole first and second industrial revolution is powered by the carbon deposits of a previous period of history. We had the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. When future generations look back on us in the geological record, they will see the carbon people. So when oil started to go over 90 a barrel, all the other prices went up, shut down in July 2008 at 147. That was the economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later was the aftershock. We are now in the beginning, not just of a great recession, but a long sunset for a second industrial revolution based on centralized telecommunications, dependent on fossil fuel energies, and those energies are used to power an internal combustion engine road and rail system. What I would say to you this afternoon, and I say this to every government that I deal with, as long as you are still practicing your economic activity on a second industrial revolution platform based on centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel, nuclear power, and internal combustion rail and road, there's not a single country in the world that's going to move their economy forward from here on. Not a single country. You can put in austerity and market and labor reforms and all the rest. That platform has now optimized its aggregate energy efficiency. We cannot get anything more out of it. That's why productivity has been stalled for 20 years. I'll come back to this later. We'll talk about something called aggregate energy efficiency, which the engineers in this room will understand. Hopefully the rest of us too. We are on the cusp of a third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, transport, and logistics. The communication internet, which we all use today, has matured. We all have our iPhones and our laptops. But now it's beginning to morph. It's converging with a digitalized renewable energy internet spawned here in Germany and now China, and an automated transport and logistics internet, and soon GPS and driverless transport and rail system. We are seeing the emergence of three internets: communication internet, renewable energy internet, automated transport internet, to rethink how we manage, power, and move economic activity across the value chains. These three internets are the kernel of a new operating platform called the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is not just about big data, broadband, and Wi-Fi. It's about how we began to place sensors in every machine and device, not so they can just talk to each other, but so they can send big data across the value chains to these three internets. These internets are the brain, if you will. The sensors are just the nervous system, because the brain manages, powers, and moves economic activity for everyone in this room. So we have 14 billion sensors connecting devices now. We have sensors monitoring our food crops, sensors on the factory floor sending data back to these three emerging internets, sensors in retail stores, smart homes with sensors, smart vehicles, warehouses, smart roads. By 2030, Fairchild says maybe 100 trillion sensors. Every machine is now talking to every other machine, but sending data back to these three key components of every economic paradigm: communication, energy, transport. On the upside, this is a huge leap forward for the human race, because for the first time in history, everyone's going to have a transparent picture of the economic life of society. We are leveling the playing field and democratizing economic life. I teach in the oldest business school in the world, the Wharton School. I taught the advanced management program for 15 years, and the first thing we say is caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware, because no seller wants to let the buyer know what the seller knows. Now everyone will know what everyone knows. We think the Snowden affair with government's a big deal. If this network stays open, everyone's going to know what's going on across the economic value chain. And what this means is we have 3 billion people connected to the internet, and now with the Internet of Things, everyone's going to be connected within the next 20 years. I just got back from China, where the plan I'm outlining today is moving in China as well as here in Germany. And the Vice Premier Wang Yang said, Jeremy, we now have a $25 smartphone, so if you're making $2 a day, you're going to be connected within the next generation, 20 years. So it means that any of us in this room, we all have a value chain. As individuals and families, small businesses, large companies, neighborhoods, we all have a value chain because as an economic being, every day you and I are marshaling economic activity, right? We're rearranging economic activity, we're producing economic activity, we're storing economic activity, we're consuming economic activity, and we're recycling economic activity. That's what it means to be part of the economy. What this means and what this fair is really all about, with all of that technology out there that you're looking at, is any one of us now connected to the emerging Internet of Things can go up on this value, on this system, and cut our sheath of the value chain out, the value chain we're interested in, and watch our own data across our value chain, maybe our smart house, maybe our vehicle, maybe my neighborhood, maybe my SME. We can cut out our value, our data, and we can use our own analytics to create our own algorithms with our own apps, because there are going to be thousands of companies creating the apps for us, so that each one of us can dramatically increase our aggregate energy efficiency at every step of conversion of our individual value chains and how we manage, power, and move economic activity. And by constantly using analytics and algorithms and apps to do that, we dramatically increase our productivity every single day. We dramatically reduce our marginal cost. Marginal cost of the cost of producing an additional unit of a good or service after we pay the fixed cost. We're going to be able to dramatically increase productivity, reduce marginal cost, to create a very streamlined global capitalist market. It means low marginal cost, low profit, but high volume. You make the profit by the networks. We're going to be able to reduce some of the marginal cost with digital technology to near zero, meaning we can free up some goods and services from the capitalist market to be shared freely and abundantly in the sharing economy now growing in the collaborative commons. Let me take a moment here. We're hearing a lot about the sharing economy every day, and we're becoming engaged in it. Capitalism is giving birth. This is the little prodigy of capitalism. Capitalism is giving birth to a child. And this new sharing economy and the collaborative commons is flourishing alongside its grown-up parent capitalism. This is the first new economic system to enter onto the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the early 19th century. So this little baby's an important event. Now, the parent is going to transform the child. Capitalism is going to have to nurture this sharing economy, let it grow, let it mature, let it find its own identity. But if you're a parent, you know your child transforms you too. In this case, the sharing economy is going to utterly transform capitalism, unrecognizable in 35 years from now, because it will have to find a way to accommodate and find value and to live in partnership with its grown-up progeny over the next 20 years. Capitalism is not going to disappear, utterly transformed, but by mid-century, 35 years from now, I will have to say I do not think capitalism will be the primary exclusive arbiter of economic life. It's going to share the center stage with its grown-up progeny to the extent they each value each other. Our children will have an option of part of their life every day in the exchange economy, low marginal cost, capitalist market, and part of the day in the sharing economy, zero marginal cost on the collaborative commons. It's already here. When I wrote the Zero Marginal Cost Society, the first reaction, at least among my family, they say, isn't this far off in the future? And I laugh, I'm amused. We've already seen the impact of what digitalization of communications done to give us a near zero marginal cost economy. It all started with that little file sharing service, Napster. 15 years is all it's been. We now have 3 billion people on the Internet of Things, and every one of them now has been a prosumer, everyone in this room. We're still sellers, we're still buyers, we're still owners, we're still users, but now we're prosumers. And that is every one of us at one time or another has produced or shared music or YouTube videos or news blogs or social media or knowledge on Wikipedia or taken massive open online college courses, and that's all near zero marginal cost. If you create a video, open source, And whether you send it to one person or a billion people, it's the same cost, near zero. The fixed costs are low, the marginal cost near zero. Some of the biggest vertically integrated industries of the 20th century have been disrupted. The music industry is a shadow of itself. Television, the average millennial in my country is watching 20 minutes of broadcast TV a week. Why do they need to do that? They're producing and sharing YouTube videos with each other. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business or desperately tried to create blogs. Book publishing, we're taking a hit. My book was out on Pirate Bay before it was published by my publisher, and they even ranked it before Amazon. Got to hand it to these kids. They're really good. More power to them. So what we thought here is that we began to see the democratization of entertainment, news, knowledge. This is an amazing thing. It used to be just a handful of institutions would be the arbiter of our culture. Now, we're all players. We're social entrepreneurs. Every one of us feels that we can give our talent freely to 1 billion people at near zero marginal cost, and maybe somebody will care. And they do sometimes. This is extraordinary. But we thought there'd be a firewall here, and the zero marginal cost might impact the virtual world, but it would not move over to the physical world. In the zero marginal cost society, I make the point that that firewall is now down. When the communication internet converges with the digitalized renewable energy internet and the automated GPS and soon driverless transport and logistics internet, the firewall is gone. Because now we can begin to entertain the possibility of the whole human race producing and sharing their own renewable energy at near zero marginal cost. And beginning to share their own vehicles and transport and logistics systems whose marginal costs are heading toward near zero. And begin to produce their own 3D printed products and share it with each other at low marginal cost in the capitalist market or zero marginal cost in the sharing economy. Let's look at energy. While the United States certainly was at the forefront of the first of the 3 internets for the Internet of Things, the communication internet, fair to say, Silicon Valley, we were there. What's interesting is Germany is leaping ahead on the second internet, the energy internet. And now China's joining Germany. Watch this, because the second internet is key to this new era in history. Germany is now 27%. Let me share an anecdote. When the chancellor came into power, she asked me to come to Berlin the first couple of weeks to help her address the question how to grow the German economy. My first question to your chancellor is, how do you grow the German economy in the last stages of a great industrial era where the communications, the energy, and the transport have optimized out? I laid out this plan to the chancellor the first night, and she said, I want this for Germany. But so did the socialists. They wanted it, and so did the Greens. So here's where Germany is right now. You are 27% green electricity this afternoon, solar and wind. You're heading to 35% solar and wind by 2020. You're heading to 100% renewable energies across the board by 2040. You are moving on the second internet as fast as the United States moved on the first, the communication internet. Now here's what's interesting, the parallel with the communication internet. Solar and wind are on exponential curves very similar to the curves we had in computing. When I was a kid in the 50s, computers cost millions of dollars. There were only a few. We didn't anticipate Moore's Law. That Intel company could double the capacity, half the cost of those chips every 2 years, now $25 smartphone. We're on a similar exponential curve for over 20 years in solar and wind. Listen to this. A solar watt cost $78 to generate, fixed cost, in 1978. $76 to $78. You know what it is today? 1 watt, 36 cents. And we are now in the United States, some regions are selling long-term power contracts. They're not buying from the natural gas or coal. They're buying from solar and wind at 4 cents a kilowatt hour, long-term contracts. They see the exponential curve. Once we pay back those fixed costs, and they're plummeting, they're going to be as cheap. Your little bioconverter, your little vertical wind, your geothermal heat pump's going to be as cheap as those smartphones in 25 years. That curve's not going away. But in Germany, once you pay the fixed cost for your solar or wind or geothermal heat, the marginal cost of the energy being generated right now in Germany, it's near zero marginal cost right now. The sun is not sending a bill over Germany. The wind is not charging you. The geothermal heat is not sending you an invoice. So we now have 27% of the energy now, zero marginal cost. And in May of last year, you had one Sunday where almost the entire electricity grid was powered by solar and wind, and you had negative prices. What is that? Negative prices, because it's free. How do you compete with free if in an old industrial system based on fossil fuel and nuclear power for transportation, logistics, communication? Yes, you have to get over the hump. You put in subsidies with a feed-in tariff. But now it's moving so quickly that you can roll those subsidies back out, whereas fossil fuel and nuclear have been subsidized for a century. These subsidies are moving back out. Yes, the utilities are passing on the feed-in tariff to the ratepayers, so you have a little higher electricity bill, but in a few years, you're there. You have to put in the storage, because these are intermittent energies. You have to put in the energy internet, and you have to put in the advanced meters. I said you need to do all of this. You didn't do as well on these other things. You're going to put them in now. Starting this year, Sigmar Gabriel, the economic vice chancellor, they know what has to be done. Germany is now moving ahead with the energy internet. Now, who is producing the energy? We have 4 major power companies in Germany: EnBW, RWE, E.ON, Vattenfall. We thought they were invincible, giant vertically integrated companies. And what happened to them in the last 7 years is what happened to the music industry, book publishing, newspapers, magazines. Apparently, the German public decided that they were the new generators of the electricity, so you all went out and created electricity cooperatives. Everybody, everywhere. And every one of you got low-interest loans from the banks. The government didn't give you the money. And the reason the banks gave you the loans is you paid back with the energy savings, so they knew you couldn't default. And so electricity cooperatives, the German public now is democratizing energy, and the big 4 power companies are producing less than 7%. They can't scale it. Because they're vertically integrated, they do much better at centralized energy. They really are more efficient. But this requires millions of small players collecting small amounts of sun and wind and geothermal, storing them, and then sharing them over an energy internet. It favors cooperatives. Does this mean the end of the power companies? No, but remember, capitalism will be transformed. Now that we have a new commons for energy, the power company is going to have to create a new business model, because in 10 years from now, it won't be millions, but tens of millions of locations. And then in 20 years, hundreds of millions, maybe 1 billion locations where everyone's going to be producing their own electricity, even in the developing world. I was there at the Africa CEO Summit in Geneva yesterday. It's going to move everywhere because of the curves. If you can get a cell phone in Africa 5 years ago because of the cost, you're going to have your bioconverters, your solar panels within the next few years, 20 years. So what's the role of the power company? What's going to happen is electricity cooperatives around the world, we will produce the energy locally, share it on an energy internet, send it back to the power companies, let them run the new energy internet. They can be the Facebooks, the Googles, the Twitters. And the way they'll make money is by selling less and less electricity. They'll set up partnerships with thousands of institutions, neighborhood associations, homeowners, businesses, and they will help you manage the big data on your value chain, on the communication, energy, and transport internet, so that they will help you with your analytics and algorithms so that you can dramatically increase your efficiencies, reduce your marginal cost, and then you will share your productivity gains back with the power company. It's called performance contracting. More money, sell less electricity, increase efficiency and productivity. I debated Mr. Tyson at E.ON 5 years ago at the request of E.ON in the Netherlands. He said, this is not going to happen. They did it 3 months ago. They sold off their solar and their fossil fuel and nuclear to their credit. They're stepped forward. They're moving to the new business model, but they're not alone, ERDF and EDF. They're not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow, but they've joined my global team. My global group is 100 of the biggest companies across the industries. We're laying down this infrastructure. ERDF and EDF have joined us in northern industrial France. They're going to help us lay out the energy internet across metropolitan Lille in the next 10 years. So companies are not leaving the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but they know they have to also be in the third industrial revolution in order to ease the transition, or there'll be history. It's not either or tomorrow. It's how do you create a business model that takes you from the old to the new. Some companies won't make it. And if the power companies don't do it, guess what? The ICT companies would like to run the energy internet, and so would the consumer electronics company, a lot of other companies in our group, so it's going to be a race. And of course, if they're going to manage these institutions, these commons, and this is true for the communication and energy commons, we're going to have to see them as public utilities. We'll keep them private, but they're going to be regulated, just like we regulated the electricity companies and the telephone companies because they were public goods. We'll let them stay private, let them have a profit. But for sure, if this is a good we all need, we're going to make sure that they are global utilities. That struggle is happening. A digital generation is not going to allow themselves to be exploited. The communication and energy internet, by the way, I mentioned China. The last book, Third Industrial Revolution, that I published, by sheer serendipity, Vice Premier Li, when he was Vice Premier, was in Germany, and someone slipped him a German copy of the book, whoever you are. He read the book. He became the Premier. He put out his biography. I thought it was a joke. He said he was a fan, had read the book, and instructed the Chinese government to begin moving on the central themes I'm outlining to you today, mindful that China lost the first industrial revolution, barely joined the second, and now doesn't want to be left out of the third. Vice Premier Wang Yang also endorsed it. He's now on the 10-person Central Committee. And after my first formal visit there 2 years ago, I just got back again. This shows you how fast China can follow Germany. 11 weeks after I was at my first visit, the chairman of the National Grid of China announced an $82 billion four-year startup this year to lay out a distributed energy internet across China starting this year, $82 billion, so that everyone in China can produce their own solar and wind and share it back on an energy internet, following Germany. Watch Germany as the engine for the EU. Watch China, the engine for the Asia. Maybe in the Q&A we'll talk about how China and Germany may join together here in a new Silk Road. We'll see. So the communication energy internet makes possible the transport and logistics internet. Millions of young people are now car sharing. They don't want ownership, they want access to mobility. Grandma and grandpa own cars. That's history. And I can tell you from here on in with the logistics internet, the millennial parents, their children, their grandchildren will never own cars again. That is going to die out over the next 25 years. They want access to mobility in automated networks. Car ownership is an old idea. And what's made this possible is GPS guidance. Because you go up on your smartphone, you connect immediately to the communication internet, which gets you right to the GPS transport internet. They connect you to a driver. Within 90 seconds, you're off. For every car shared, 15 cars are being eliminated from production. This is going to disrupt the auto industry because we built the whole global economy on the automobile. I don't have to tell you in Germany and America this. Now, Larry Burns was the former executive vice president of General Motors until 5 years ago, then in charge of all future car development. So I got Larry Burns in the book. He just did a study. He's a professor at the University of Michigan. He studied Ann Arbor, Michigan. He said, well, you know what? Right now, as early as this logistics internet is, we can eliminate 80% of the vehicles tomorrow morning in Ann Arbor. The other 20% will give us more mobility and cheaper. This is the former executive VP 5 years ago, General Motors. There's 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in the world, choking us in traffic, wasting our lives, and they're the number 3 cause of climate change. Number 1, buildings, and we're turning them into micro power plants in Germany, and we're putting the green electricity on them. Number 3 is transport. By the way, anyone know what the number 2 cause of climate change is? Yeah, it's cattle and beef production and consumption, and even Al Gore doesn't want to talk about it because he doesn't want to offend anyone, which makes us wonder how serious we are about this. But number 3 is transport. We're going to eliminate 80% of those vehicles with car sharing in the next generation as you move from ownership to access. The vehicles we keep will be electric. They'll be fuel cell. They'll be powered by near zero marginal cost renewable energy, where millions of us provide the energy and share it on continental energy internets. And guess what? They'll be driverless on automated systems at low marginal cost, accompanied by drones also at very low marginal cost for logistics. Everything I've just said is happening. It's just about scale up and build out. Once we have this system start to mature, we see the opportunities for things like 3D printing. Germany is a leader in 3D printing. U.S. is coming on strong everywhere. The young people are 3D printing. They're infofacturing, not manufacturing, and they're all using open source software. So it's free, because they realize if they share together with crowdsourcing, they're going to learn a lot. And if someone tries to hold on to their little property, so what? They're left behind. They can't catch up with crowdsourcing. And they're using garbage for their filament at zero marginal cost. You have to collect it, but recycle paper, recycle plastic, recycle metal objects, and they're melting it down. The additive manufacturing uses 1/10 of the material of subtractive centralized factories. And they're beginning to power their fabrication labs, the young people, with their own energy, off-grid, solar and wind, near zero marginal cost. And they're beginning to use electric vehicles powered by their own energy to get the 3D products to the market. The first printed car is now out. It's the Stratti. It's an Italian car. It's being produced by Local Motors. It's drop-dead gorgeous. The Italians know how to do design. They're often first in show, but they sometimes don't then close the deal with mass production, but they're there. And you ought to take a look at this car, because in 10, 15 years from now, a lot of the vehicles will be printed with recycled and redistributed materials. It's starting. President Obama wants every school to have one 3D printer, which is a laugh, because in 10 or 15 years, every kid's going to come to school everywhere in the world, and on a little knapsack, they're going to have a little iPhone for 25 bucks. And then on the other part of the knapsack, no more Lego toy. They're going to have a little startup printer for 25 bucks. And they're going to start collecting the garbage around the school site. And they're going to Skype in global classrooms, millions of them. And they're going to become as savvy in printing out physical goods and services at near zero marginal cost as their millennial parents became savvy at developing software from Napster to news blogs. How do centralized factories compete with the crowdsourcing opportunities of moving precision manufacturing? This is a boost for SMEs. A lot of us will produce the simple things for each other, but German SMEs are going to produce the more complicated stuff at very low marginal cost in the capitalist market. It means the big companies don't disappear, but if they want to stay around, they're going to be more and more having to play on a level playing field with the SMEs, who are going to be really in charge of the design and production, not outsourced in a colonial manner. And the big companies will help aggregate the networks, but they're not going to be able to dominate, because SMEs can aggregate the networks too in cooperatives, and they can have marketing through devices like Etsy all the way to Amazon at very cheap cost. By the way, will it mean the end of the auto industry? Certainly they can see that they're going to produce less cars in an automated sharing system. Eventually, the car companies, they're already starting this conversation, they're going to move from selling cars to managing the transport and logistics grid. They may own the vehicles, the cars, buses, and trucks, and they will manage the logistics. If they don't, Amazon would like to do it, or Google, or IBM, or somebody else. And again, they will have to be treated as public utilities. We'll have to make sure that they serve the public and not the public becoming indentured in a new low marginal cost capitalist market or a sharing economy. The best way to understand this revolution is toys. You know, most people don't realize that the modern commercial toy, another German invention, Ravensburg, Germany. I went to this beautiful medieval town. Have many of you been there? That's where the commercial toy was created. This town has been spared everything, occupation, fires, war. It seems to be the angels are looking over this town. So they created the modern toy. So parents bring home toys to their 2.5-year-old kid, and they introduce them to property exchange and capitalist markets. They say to their 2-year-old daughter, we bought this toy at the store. We're now giving it to you. It's your property. It's not your brother's toy. It's not your sister's toy. Your toy. Take care of it. And that 2.5-year-old's thinking, what did I just hear? This is not my brother and sister's toy, my toy. For the first time in her life, power, status, control. Her siblings will never use that toy unless she gets something in return. She's learning about property and markets. I'm not opposed to it. I teach market capitalism. I think people ought to have property in markets. But now there's another choice as well. In the sharing economy, we've got millennial parents here in Europe and in my country. They're going up on toy websites, and what they're doing is they're taking a subscription fee, one-time entry, then they can download any toy, share it, and send it on. They give their 2.5-year-old daughter the toy, and they say, this toy, another child played with this toy and made a lot of fun. She had a great time. She took real good care of it because she knew one day you'd play with the toy. You will take good care of it and steward it because one day another little child will play with the toy. The child's learning a toy is not possession and status and power. It's an experience for a moment of time to have joy with. And then take care of it so another child can enjoy it. She's getting ready to share the vehicles, share the homes, share much of our lives in a circular economy. And when she gets older, she's going to have a choice between some property exchange in markets and some sharing at zero marginal cost in a sharing economy. It's the democratization of economic life. Where do we go from here? I want to go back, as I said to you, to something called aggregate energy efficiency for all the business people in this room. Aggregate energy efficiency is the ratio of potential to useful work. Now, there's a dirty little secret in economics, which is, what is the nature of productivity? We used to say better machines, better workers. When Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize in economic growth theory, he let the little secret out. He said, well, we got a problem. When we take every year the Industrial Revolution, better machines and better workers only account for 14% of the productivity. Where's the other 86%? Oh, no. Are you amazed that economists didn't know? The reason they didn't know, it's a little esoteric, I have a chapter in the book on it, is that classical and neoclassical economic theory is based on Newton's physics as metaphor, because that's when Newton was alive, they all wanted to be like Newton. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Adam Smith came up with the invisible hand of supply and demand. He borrowed the metaphor. A body in motion stays in motion. Baptists say came up with the idea that supply generates demand, which stimulates supply, unless disrupted by an outside force. The only problem with penning all of economics based on Newton's physics has nothing to do with economics. That's why the system is starting to unravel. Economics is based on the laws of thermodynamics, and those laws were discovered by German and American engineers and chemists in the late 19th century. First law of energy, all energy is constant. We don't create it, we don't destroy it. Second law is we do change it from order to disorder, available to unavailable, hot to cold. We are a closed system. That is, in relation to the sun, an open system would exchange matter and energy. An isolated system doesn't exchange either. A closed only exchanges energy. We are closed. We exchange energy, but except for a few meteorites, we're pretty well stuck with what we have as a remnant of the sun. So we take low entropy available energy out of nature. It can be a rare earth. It can be a metallic ore, a fossil fuel. We use it. At every step of conversion, we're trying to embed some form of energy in the form of materials or whatever into the product, but we lose energy in the conversion at every step. That's the aggregate energy efficiency. Here's what I want to say to the business people here. We started the second industrial revolution at 3% aggregate energy efficiency in 1905 across every value chain. 97% lost. By the 1980s, the U.S. got up to 13% aggregate energy efficiency, and we've never moved since. Japan led the world at 22% aggregate energy efficiency, hasn't moved in 20 years. So when economists say we don't understand why productivity is not moving, we have all these innovations out of Silicon Valley, why is it not moving? Because if those innovations are still plugged in to a second industrial revolution platform of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel, nuclear power, internal combustion transport, we can't get anything more out of them. It hasn't moved in 20 years. If we move in Germany to lead a third industrial revolution, Internet of Things world, we can move from 13% aggregate energy efficiency to 40% in 25 years. Then thermodynamics slows us with our existing technological horizons. That's through the roof. How do we pay for this? This discussion's happening in Brussels. And what I said in Brussels, I met with the new leadership, and I said, if I can show you where the money is, can we get started? Here's the deal. In 2012, in the European Union, we spent $741 billion on investment in infrastructure in a bad year. That's all public and private, $741 billion. The money is there, but we're shoveling it into the old second industrial revolution platform of communication, energy, and transport, and we can't wreak any more aggregate efficiency, productivity out of the system. That's why we can't move new business ideas, we can't move employment, we can't do it. And we won't be able to do it anywhere in the world on that system. If we simply reprioritize the existing investment and let 75% of it stay in the old system, some guy has a cement factory, let him build his road to nowhere, let the graft continue, it's fine. But if we can simply put 25% into the new infrastructure and build it out across Europe, we're in a digital Europe in 25 years from now. That's the new journey. You have in front of you a memorandum that I prepared for Mr. Juncker, his team, so you're going to get it, and the Parliament. We are heading toward digital Europe, and that is to lay out an Internet of Things platform to bring together communication, energy, and transport so we can create a seamless integrated market across the EU and the partnership regions. That's 1 billion people, 500 million in the Union, 500 million in the partnership regions. It's fraught with problems. It's an uphill struggle. There's going to be 30, 40 years of trying to get this done, but this is the next stage of the European journey, to create the most competitive capitalist market in the world and to actually nurture a sharing economy. China also has committed to digital China, and they've followed Germany with the energy internet and now the transport and logistics internet. Maybe the rest of the world will come by. This will involve every industry, because we have to lay out the infrastructure. That means, except for the oil industry, I actually can't find any work for them here, which I don't sit up nights worrying about it, but the telecom companies, the cable companies, the power and transmission companies, ICT, consumer and prosumer electronics, transport, logistics, manufacturing, and construction and the life sciences. We have to take every single country's energy mix and move it from fossil fuel and nuclear to distributed renewables. That means we have to retrofit every building in the world. Because unless we get them efficient, we can't put the micro power on them because they leak. Retrofitting is the most labor-intensive industry. Insulating buildings, it's going to require millions of unskilled labor, but the return on the investment is immediate because of the energy savings. So you can get all the loans you want. You just have to scale it. Then we have to put the micro technology on. When Germany got to 10% renewable energy, you had already created 350,000 net jobs. That's more than all the other jobs in the whole energy industry, and that was at 10%. Then we have to take the entire electricity transmission lines of Germany and the world and transform them from dumb to smart and from servo-mechanical to digital. Who's going to lay down the underground cable? Robots aren't going to do that. Humans do it. Then we have to bring together all the industries to help manage that electricity transmission, ICT, consumer electronics, etc. Then we have to take the whole transportation infrastructure and move it from dumb to smart roads and from internal combustion to fuel cell electric transport. That means we need millions of charging stations. Every single parking space has to have a charging station so you can plug your electric and fuel cell vehicle into the grid, get power, or sell it back. Robots won't do that. So what I'm suggesting here is we have 2 generations to bring everyone back to work to lay out this smart infrastructure. However, that's all we've got. Some of you remember the book I wrote, The End of Work, 1995. We are automating every single field, manufacturing, white-collar, knowledge industries. What I didn't see then, and none of us did, is the prospect of one more big third industrial revolution infrastructure build-out. It gives us a short reprieve of 40 years to bring everyone back to work. But be clear, what we're working on is a smart cognitive infrastructure that works by analytics, algorithms, automation, and very small workforces. So where's the employment going? My colleagues are so short-sighted that they think, okay, let's pay everyone just an income so they can enjoy their life because there's nothing for them to do. That's nonsense. We're a social creature. The idea that the only employment you can have is in a capitalist market is really ridiculous. We're seeing already the migration of employment. It's migrating from a more and more automated workforce to the social economy, the not-for-profit sector, because that's where we create social capital. You need humans. Healthcare, education, environment, taking care of the babies, senior citizens, cultural. It's the more expansive way to use the human mind because it's about humans engaging humans. 52 million people are paid for fees for services already in this sector, and it's 10% of the employment of the U.S. It's higher here in Germany. And this sector employment's growing much quicker than the capitalist market. So we're going to be able to free up successive generations for more creative tasks of creating our social capital and getting on with the journey of what we're about here on this planet. Does anyone think that human beings are going to have to be doing all this mindless work in 50 years if we get any of this right? I hope not. I hope that our grandchildren look back and say, gee, Grandpa had to drive a truck back and forth the same street all day long for 50 years. He drove a truck. And Grandma watched things going off an assembly line. They'll feel as bad for them as we felt for serfs and slaves and serfdom before the industrial age. Last thought. The reason I wrote this book, even though there's only a few pages in the book on it, is what I've outlined to you this afternoon, I believe, is the only shot we've got of maybe reducing our ecological footprint in time to address climate change. I got it wrong for 40 years. I underestimated the speed of the feedback loops, and we are terrified. I don't know how to say this to a parent. You should be terrified. But we're going on as business as usual. I know at least in Europe you believe that climate change is real, but we're going on as business as usual. And here's the terrifying thing about climate change that no one ever explains. It changes the water cycle of the earth. That's what this is about. We're the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on water cycles. For every 1 degree the temperature goes up from industrial climate change, the atmosphere is actually sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat forces it up. We're getting concentrated water in the atmosphere in extreme water events, extreme snows. So someone says it snows, it must not be getting warmer. No, it's snowing because of the water cycle. Extreme dramatic flooding, Eastern Europe. Prolonged droughts. There's no more water in Sao Paulo. We're out of water in Pakistan. We're out of water in California. My God, and it's only 2014. More Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. Our ecosystems can't catch up to this water cycle shift. And our scientists tell us we're in the 6th extinction event. We've had 5 over 450 million years, and each time it was the die-out was really quick. 10 million years to get life back on the planet. We're in the 6th extinction event. This is not controversial. We may lose 70% of all forms of life in this little oasis by the time your little babies are my age at the end of this century. We don't know if our species will survive this. As my wife says, we're not grasping the enormity of the moment. You know, 99.5% of all the forms of life that have been on this earth have come and gone. 99.5%. How do you like those odds? What does this have to do with an Internet of Things platform for a zero marginal cost society? It's the ultimate metric for reducing the ecological footprint. If we can have analytics and apps and programs every day, all day long in our value chains, monitoring and helping us increase our efficiencies, it means we're extracting less of the Earth's resources and optimizing its use. That's the great wonder of this technology being exhibited out here. And then if what we do produce at low marginal cost, if it's in the capitalist market, when we're done with it, share it in the sharing economy. So more of us are using less resources, share the vehicles, share the clothes, share the homes. And then if we put in the energy internet and follow Germany's lead around the world, we're all going to be producing our own solar, wind, geothermal, biomass energy, and 25 years from now, we're off carbon. And it's free once the infrastructure's in, and it's democratic, and everybody has power to the people. And if we put in the transport and logistics internet, we eliminate 80% of the vehicles. Think of the Earth's materials we don't have to use. And then that transport system's automated so that logistically we can be more efficient with our transport of goods and services. So here's the thing that I would have to say in Germany. Thank you. Honest to God, thank you, Germany. I know Germany doesn't like to hear about leadership. You know, every time we say Germany's leadership, no, we don't lead. And every time we talk about a new technology revolution, my German friends will say, this can't be done, won't be done, don't think it can be done, can't do it, while they do it. It's really, they're doing it, and then all the time say, I don't think it can be done, and then they do it. It's you got to lighten up a little bit and have a little bit of self-congratulations for a moment. But now, let me tell you, all over the world where I travel, everyone's looking to Germany to see if you can pull off the energy transition. Next week, March 26th and 27th, your government's going to hold an energy transition summit. 60 countries are going to be there. I'll be there. Sigmar Gabriel, Frank Steinmeier. I'll be doing this address like that in that morning. Everyone's looking to Germany. This is Germany's moment to help the human race democratize the economic life of this planet and hopefully create a more ecological civilization. You cannot afford to fail, because that failure will mean who then will take up the baton. So I want to say thank you on behalf of all the rest of us who are watching this, and we want to move step by step with this. And if Germany can help the EU move to a digital Internet of Things European Union, maybe it'll be a start for the rest of the world, and maybe the legacy this generation will leave will allow our future generations, our own human family, to live in a more replenished planet, and maybe we can resteward this planet so our fellow creatures have a right to enjoy life on this beautiful oasis in the universe. We got to make sure this happens. Good night.
Do you want to go up there? You want to stay down here? That was definitely, you praising Germany. That was like a big piece of German bread, full of nutrition and very heavy. That's a lot to digest, what you just shared.
It's funny you say this, because you know why? Every time I come to Germany, the first thing I want is to have that dark black bread every morning, because it's actually real bread.
That's right. It's real bread.
I've been gorging on it for weeks.
That's right. It's real bread. Do you think, is there an irony, Mr. Rifkin, that you as an American are actually singing the praises of Germany? Because I am also an American and I live here, and I've heard this ever since I've lived here, when I've praised Germany and its ability to move the world forward, as you're talking about right now. People have always said to me, you can do that because you're not German, but we Germans, we can't do that because of our history. Do you see that? Do you see the irony in that?
Well, you know what? I mean, in Germany, there's a real engineering tradition here, in a sense of keep it low key. In America, we like to think we've actually accomplished something before we've actually started it, because we'll risk everything. We'll risk our last dollar on something for the future if we get it right. I think we need a little bit more balance over our place, maybe a little more balance over here. I don't say you have to publicly congratulate yourself. Better that you stick with keeping your head to the wheel and making sure this happens for Germany and for the rest of the world. And then, maybe let your children or grandchildren look back and say, my grandma and grandpa did the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about this new Silk Road, the Germany-China connection. We had the Germany-China summit yesterday on this stage, and what was interesting is one of the Chinese businessmen, he slipped something out. I don't know if the audience got it in the translation, but he said, actually, our premier came up with something called the Internet Plus, which was Industry 4.0 before the Germans came up with it, but the fact that they were both on the same wavelength.
Well, yeah, this is a new. Let me mention the 4.0 just for a minute, because I want to make sure that I understand the German plan for 4.0, but there isn't a fourth industrial revolution. 4.0 might be the technology. Let me explain something. The third industrial revolution is the digital revolution. And it really began in the 1970s with our personal computers and everything else. And so this Internet of Things doesn't move us to a fourth. It moves to the maturing of the digitalization of every aspect of our life. So you can measure the first industrial revolution, steam, power, et cetera. The second, servo-mechanical, electricity, and oil. The third is the digitalization of the world. So keep the 4.0, but understand that is not a fourth industrial revolution, because it'll confuse everything. It really is the digital revolution being matured. In terms of the Silk Road, it's really interesting. Number one, Eurasia is the largest landmass in the world, contiguous. It represents 2/3 of the human race and 29% of the wealth of the planet. Number two, there has been a tradition of trade across Eurasia for 1,000 years. Number three, independently, both the EU and China are moving in their respective political domains to lay out an Internet of Things platform for a third industrial revolution. Number four, Chairman Xi and Premier Li now suggest a Eurasian Silk Road economic belt from Shanghai to the Irish Sea over the next half century. But the initial idea of this was fairly modest. We have a railroad now that sort of inches its way across Eurasia for cargo, and they want to build some road systems in and maybe a little internet connection. What I'm suggesting is that if China is building out its Internet of Things third industrial revolution and Germany is doing it here as a flagship for the rest of Europe, perhaps we ought to think more boldly as a long-term plan, and that is digital Eurasia. To bring together German industry and businesses with Chinese industries and businesses across the categories, telecom, cable, ICT, electronics, transport, logistics, manufacturing, and collaboratively work to help bring this infrastructure and collaborate with regions across Eurasia, some of the poorest regions of the world, to lay out an integrated Internet of Things platform for a digital Europe that could begin to democratize economic life and create an ecological civilization. I know it's a stretch. I know it's difficult to imagine at this point. But why wouldn't that be the next journey? If both of these respective political and economic regimes are doing this, perhaps we can overcome all the geopolitics of the first and second industrial revolution, begin to think biosphere, begin to think how we can collaborate and do more to create a good quality of life by collaboration rather than competition. I know I'm not naive. I understand what I'm talking about is something that it would be hard to even imagine at this point. But what I say to you is that technology is moving so quick on exponential curves that even if you cross the stands and where there are tribal blood wars and political wars and religious wars, you're still, a younger generation there is becoming digital, and they're starting to queue into Facebook and Twitter and Google, and you're going to begin to see a lot of very quick changes in how they begin to think more globally as part of a human family. So I think it's potentially possible. I think a Sino-German collaboration would be interesting. It's interesting that many Chinese engineers in the leadership, they were all educated in Germany, many of them that I've met. They have an empathic compatibility with their German friends because this is where they spend a lot of time. So there's a built-in social capital there.
Yeah, they were all speaking German in the audience yesterday, which was interesting. Yeah.
And when I'm in Beijing, they always talk about our German friends. Now, in Germany, you have world-class engineering. There's a lot Germany can bring to the table here, all the Fraunhofer Institutes, et cetera. So I think it's possible to begin seeing a Sino-German collaboration. That's why they jointly sponsored this conference, to begin to see how do we work together. Why not a digital Eurasia Silk Road economic belt? And why not think long-term, something bold, a new vision? We haven't had a new vision since the post-Westphalian nation state, for God's sake. How about a new vision of the human race coming together across the great land masses and beginning to share the economic life as an extended family? We live by our stories, and we live by thinking of a better journey. This is a better journey. If we dwell on journeys that are dysfunctional and moribund, we lose our energy and we finally become crippled by our inability to act. So I would like to propose, absolutely, a digital Eurasia economic silk belt. Let's have a Sino-German partnership and a collaboration. Let's help all these other regions and work all of us together collaboratively to see if we can make this happen.
You mentioned them as being leaders. What I think is interesting is what you haven't mentioned. You haven't mentioned the Americas, and you haven't mentioned Africa.
The Americas, California's with us.
Okay.
Absolutely. California, Washington, Oregon State, but they're not actually much considered by the rest of the country, but California is like the 7th or 8th largest country. Right. They're absolutely on target with everything we're saying in California, Oregon, Washington. Maybe New York and southern Texas, because my global team did the San Antonio to Austin build-out, but the rest of the country is just not there yet. It is not there. Don't wait. Show the journey. And one thing I know about America, when we see the story, finally, we move really quickly. We just don't see the story. And the old energy companies have a lock, and they're in the shale gas and tar sand. But if Germany can show the way, I would love to see everybody involved. It shouldn't be just a Eurasia Silk Road. It should be a global Silk Road so that we can connect the whole human race together. So I'm guardedly hopeful. And instead of waiting to see what America do, now Germany and China are moving ahead. And we have our eyes open, our ears open. And California certainly is ready to go. Maybe you can help move this thing forward.
All right, it's 6 o'clock. We know there's a book signing that you're going to be doing outside when we're done. How much time do you have right now? Do you want to do for it? Okay. We want to take a couple of questions from the audience. One thing someone asked me to ask you, what about all of this sectarian violence, the fact that you have what some people say is a clash of cultures going on in the world, modernity, the world you're talking about, clashing with ISIS, with people who are holding on to a version of the world that is based in extremism and fundamentalism?
This book that I just finished is the third in a 4-book series. The first was called Empathic Civilization, where I went back. It's 690 pages. My wife said, "Are you out of your mind? No one's going to read that." But anyway, of course, my family doesn't read any of them. But in any event, what I was saying in that book is something relevant to what you're saying. And that is, if we look at historians' view of history, we get a very dismal picture of the human race because they chronicle all the terrible things: genocide, war, violence, redress of grievances, because those events get our attention and historically they imprint. But if we were all these pathological events, as we see in our history books, we would have died out a long time ago. There's another history for the human race. We're the most social creature. We have the biggest neocortex. And we now know in neurobiology that we are actually, in our neural circuitry, designed to express empathic distress in our neural circuitry. Spider goes up your arm, I'm watching, I'll think it's going up my arm, not my brain. My neural circuitry creeps out. As far as we know, crocodiles don't do this. So what we're finding is, if you take a look at the big sweep in history, we've seen the evolution of empathic consciousness accompanying our great changes in the way we manage power and move economic activity. If you look at a forager-hunter society where, their activity was just local to the 50 people in the tribe, empathy extended to blood ties. And the thinking was mythological. If you were in the next valley, you were a demon. When you go to the great hydraulic civilizations, like in Mesopotamia, India, China, and Mesopotamia, all the great religions were formed then, and we created new fictional ties for empathy. So in first-generation Rome, all Christians would kiss each other. They weren't biologically related, but they began to empathize in this larger framework as fellow travelers with their religious identity. When we get to the 19th century, we see an evolution again, there's many in between, where people began to identify with their nation as a fictional family with the nation state. So all French people start to think of each other as brothers and sisters, and they kiss each other, but maybe they don't kiss the Germans.
Right.
What I'm saying is that each time we've broadened our economic, our temporal, and spatial relationships, we've extended our cohesion to larger groups. In the 20th century, Second Industrial Revolution, psychological consciousness. We began to affiliate globally with people of like-minded interest. What's happening now, I think, all these other forms of consciousness are still here. There are people fighting tribal blood wars from Afghanistan to the Middle East. There are people fighting religious wars with the old consciousness. There are people fighting ideological wars like in Russia and the Ukraine. All of that's still here, but keep our eye on what's happening. The human race is also moving forward in what you're beginning to see with the kids. The digital revolution is biosphere consciousness, absolutely.
Biosphere consciousness.
Biosphere is the sheath from the stratosphere to the oceans. It's 40 miles, where the chemistry and the life systems engage to maintain life. So we've got kids coming home in the developed world, especially middle class, and they're saying to their parents, "Why are you using so much water? You're wasting it. Why is the TV on? We're wasting the electricity. Why do you have 2 cars there? You're not using them car share." Or the one I like, I know you're not going to like to hear this. There are a lot of kids coming home and saying, "Where the hell did this hamburger come from? Did it come from a rainforest?" Because the kids are smart enough to connect the dots. If it came from a rainforest, they had to destroy the trees for the soil. But they know that rare animal and plant life live only in those tree canopies. They go extinct. And the kid knows that if the trees are destroyed to graze the cow for my hamburger, that the trees are no longer absorbing CO2 from industrial climate change, and the temperature's going up on the planet, and some farmer has drought and can't feed her kids because of the hamburger. They're learning that everything we do has an ecological footprint, literally everything we do, that affects some other human, some other family, some other creature, some other ecosystem. Had I said that 40 years ago, people would have put me in the nut house.
Yeah.
We now know that that's the actual biochemistry of our planet. So these kids are learning that we're all interconnected because they're part of a digital generation, and they're connecting all over the world. So with all of these terrible things going on, there's still some hope that a younger generation is beginning to evolve toward a more biosphere empathic frame of reference. And I'm hoping we can get there in time. But it's not as if all these old forms they're going to dog us. But I think demographics is on the side. As younger people become more part of a globally connected world and they see themselves on Facebook as a global family, yep. I think we're going to get, I hope we'll get there.
I want to open this up to questions. Final question from the back room here. Tomorrow, Edward Snowden, Glenn Greenwald going to be on the stage here. What do you say to them?
Well, I'm a big fan. I think that it's time for transparency in this world. You know, what limits democracy is secrecy and security and control from the top down. And I think it's important, we're getting all of this surveillance coming our way. Yeah. Remember I said we have to deal with data security and privacy and all these issues? So, I mean, one of the things, the Internet of Things, it allows those in power to watch us all the time. But it also allows us to watch them. See? Not just the Snowdens, and there's more of us than there are of them. So if anything goes wrong, within 10 seconds on Twitter, the entire world knows because you and I are up there doing it. So there are more of us than there are people at the top on the security. So everyone's surveilling everyone else now. What I think is that we want to see a more transparent, open world. We need to create social capital. I'm hoping that we can begin to move enough employment into the social and cultural areas, the nonprofit areas, so we can build up our social capital, our trust, our ability to give and share with each other, because that's how we create our humanity. We need desperately to make that happen. And so I'm hoping that in the years to come, we will make sure that the Internet of Things is network neutral, that the big industries that tend to dominate will be treated as public utilities. We'll let them be private, let them profit, but they're going to have to be accountable, and then we have to preserve our data, our content, our privacy, and still live in a transparent world. That's going to take several generations of political struggle. It means all the young people here, you're going to be engaged for several generations in advancing a digital Bill of Rights and responsibilities to manage a much more interconnected lateral world.
Okay. All right. We've got 10 minutes for questions. Questions here? We've got a gentleman here. Let's just take a couple of questions at once. And
No.
But do you want
too old for that.
You're too old for that? All right.
Remember.
Let's do it with this gentleman right here. Give him a microphone. Yeah.
I agree obviously with you on the role of Germany and on the fact that we need the leadership. But at the same time, I think it's important that we consider Europe as such, because Europe is a market of 500 million people. And what is needed today is to have one single market. Because if we want to do Internet of Things, if you want to do these new services, we need the scale. Even Germany is not enough alone. Even Germany cannot do. Now, we have created a new platform between Europe and China, and we are pushing the political leadership of China and Europe to agree and to discuss these issues at the next summit in Brussels, which will be at the end of June. So and we would like also to invite you to attend this event, because we would like to see Europe and China to work together on the future. And there are 5 points, if I may, only 1 minute. First point is 5G. We are asking, and I think we can achieve this, that Europe and China work together on 5G, on the vision of the future of 5G, on common standard. Second is a Juncker plan. Chinese companies, Chinese banks are interested to invest in Europe and to put the money in the European infrastructure and services. Third, working on smart cities, smart energy, and Internet of Things together, and we can do many projects between Europe and China. The last two is about Internet, electronic commerce, and startup. So I agree with you that Germany has a very important role. But what about Europe?
The memorandum you have, the one that I prepared for the Juncker Commission and the Parliament, I'm hoping this will become the centerpiece for the long-term journey. What I did is just put together what we're all doing in a narrative form. In other words, it isn't something that's coming out of the blue. I believe this will be the outlines for a digital Europe journey to create an integrated single market. The outlines in that memorandum, because it's already been discussed in so many different quarters. I simply put it together. That's all. So I'm hoping you'll take a look at that. I agree with you. The EU has, that's why we want a single energy union. We want to break down all the borders between the countries. The technology is so powerful. It's so compelling. We have now 2 generations growing up digital. This technology revolution will not be denied. We have a younger generation that is absolutely versed. This is their DNA. So I'm hoping we can push through the gates and have some leadership here. And this will come in only if all 3 sectors join in every community. You need government at every level, you need business at every level, and you need the civil society at every level with buy-in. The reason this has moved in Germany and Denmark is in every community, the civil society, the NGOs, all the neighborhoods, they joined together with local business and local government, and the 3 of them made that happen. It can't be top-down. It has to be lateral. So the key is to see how Germany and Denmark did it, and other places need to do it as well. And that is everyone come together, and so we see this as our common future, not something that is imposed on us by the outside.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions. We've got a gentleman here in the very back, and we've got a gentleman over there, and then we'll have to wrap it up so we can go out and do the book signing event. Okay.
Mr. Rifkin, you talked about the automotive sector, and in order to survive, for example, that they need to shift to being the protector of the new transportation grid. In order to play that role, that they should be governed as a public entity. Let me go back to the first industrial revolution. You had railroads. First, you had some. No, you had a lot of them, but they were local monopolies. Yeah. And then the government enforced an antitrust regime, and there was transparency, and there were rules, and they battled themselves to death, and all of them died. And on the resulting tracks, a whole new economy was built. And that analogy can also be made with regards to the dot-com bubble, which was a monetization bubble which left us all the fiber and all the degrees, etc. How big do you think is the chance that what we're witnessing now, and I call it the first to scale bubble, where there are a lot of companies trying to get into a market at the same time and willing to lower their price demands and heighten the services provided, and in the end nobody makes any money, and this seems to speed up and speed up. How do you protect yourself? What is the role for an antitrust government to, on the one hand, create a protecting regime for the citizen, and on the other hand, create a regime that big business doesn't form a cartel to keep itself alive and stifle innovation?
Let me answer that by way of one example. Uber. Now, you know, Uber is very interesting because there's some backlash to Uber all over the world. So Goldman Sachs and Google have spent a huge amount of money in financing Uber, but it's ironic that Google does not understand the very platform that they've helped design, because they see Uber as a vertically integrated, classic second industrial revolution company. And what they hope is if they pour enough money into this vertically integrated organization, that every driver in the world who owns a car will become part of this organization, and the profits will go back to Uber. They don't get it. And what I think they don't understand is that the zero marginal cost phenomena is relentless because the platform is designed to be distributed, collaborative, open, transparent, and rewards lateral economies of scale. What does this mean? How long do you think it's going to take? It's been 5 months since Uber. We're already hearing this conversation. For drivers all over the world who own the cars to say, wait a minute, why should we be giving our profit to Uber? It's not rocket science setting up a GPS guidance system. There are software people in this room that could do it tomorrow morning. Why don't we, the drivers who own the cars, Why don't we create a cooperative like the Germans did the electricity cooperatives for renewables? We get a low-interest loan from the bank. We set up the GPS guidance. And if it's as good as Uber's, which it should be, all the drivers come together in a co-op, and wouldn't everyone here in Hanover rather go with local rather than Uber? And then the revenue stays within the self-managed democratic co-op. It doesn't go to a third party. The co-ops can do it cheaper because they don't have to send profits to a renter. They're not in a rentier economy. So I think it's just a matter of time, and I think in the next few years we're going to see lots of cooperatives emerging all over the world because it's just a better business model. It'll be cheaper, and the revenue doesn't have to go in terms of rent to someone else. That's an example of how the technology helps us discipline the democratization of the economic activity. That's what I think actually may happen.
Do you see capitalism continuing to provide the innovation fast enough
I think it's going to be a combination.
Economy undermines it?
Look, for every Google, there's a Wikipedia. Wikipedia is the 6th biggest website. I would have said this is never going to happen. Millions of people contributing to the knowledge of the world and then spending their own time checking every sentence of every paragraph.
And not getting paid for it.
And not getting paid for it. You know, I grew up with Adam Smith's dictum that each individual only pursues their self-interest and never cares about the public good. That's his actual statement. But in pursuing their self-interest, the public good benefits. The kids coming out of the universities now are social entrepreneurs. They never read Adam Smith. They believe that by freely giving their talent, open source, to the communities they're in, it improves the network, which benefits them, and it improves their social reputation and capital, so they have some mobility, whether it's fees for services or profit, to make, you know, a living. So it's a completely different idea. And I would end with this. To see the generational shift, I see it in 2 ways: how we define freedom and how we define power. My generation, World War II, and the baby boomers after us, all the way back, we always believed that freedom is the ability to be an autonomous agent, to be self-sufficient, not be beholden on others. That's why we accumulate wealth, so that we can be our own sovereign. You know, and that was a way to fight off the monarchy so that we weren't dependent on, right? For a young person in a digital generation, they see freedom not as exclusivity and autonomy. For them, freedom is inclusivity in relationships. For them, autonomy is death. For them, freedom is the ability to be included in access to more and more networks where they can share their talents with each other. It's a totally different idea about freedom. And power. My generation absolutely believes power is pyramidal. End of story. There's no such thing as power unless it's a pyramid. Apparently, the younger generation doesn't believe that because they believe power is lateral. By being engaged in a distributed, collaborative, transparent setting, they actually increase the power by sharing it in a peer-to-peer production network. They have a completely different, when a young person looks at power and they judge a government or a political party or a school system or a business, they ask, is the institutional behavior centralized, patriarchal, top-down, proprietary, and closed? Or is the institutional behavior distributed, collaborative, open, transparent, and laterally scaled? So we're really beginning to see different definitions culturally of what we believe a human being's role is in relationship to our fellow human being and the planet we live in. This is good news. I'm glad the young people are doing it.
Okay. Jeremy, do you want to stop there? Did you want to take this last one? All right, this is the last question
Very
here.
quick, and I'll try to be quick.
Okay.
I'm getting wiped out myself.
Right here.
Yeah, go.
Well, we need the mic because this is live streaming too. Give them the mic right fast. There we go.
Hi. So thank you very much for the quite enlightening lecture. It's 2 parts, and I'll try and be as brief as possible. First of all, 1984, war is peace. Why is that not an alternative to the Industrial Revolution 3.0 that you're suggesting? That's the first part. And the second part is, well, climate change and Industrial Revolution 3.0 seems like Industrial 3.0 needs to beat it in terms of timing. So what do you think are the associated?
On the first one, what I said is, yeah, we're in 1984. Everybody's, the cameras are everywhere. The surveillance is everywhere. But I said there's also the counter-surveillance. We're all checking them. Because on our lateral networks, unless they close it all down, which won't happen, all of us are becoming, all the information is becoming available to all of us. And every day, we're sitting there monitoring the government, and we're putting out information on what they're doing. That's what Mr. Snowden did. But everyone's doing this all the time. So the government is less able to move. They're less able to watch what they're doing. They're less able to maneuver. So it's a two-way street. I just think there's more of us than there are of them. And with this technology, I think we're going to out-survey them before they out-survey us. That's just because it's just a matter of the numbers. And so I think we're beginning to get to a point where we can demand accountability, and that's why the Snowden thing is so interesting. A young guy, he simply took all the documents. It was easy. But this is happening every day. They can't hide anymore. Those in power keep power because they're anonymous, and they can hide, and their deeds are not exposed. Does anyone think that they can keep it secret, all their secrets anymore? That's the end of power, when you can't keep the secrets. In 1984, there was no countervailing ability to have counter-surveillance, all right? Secondly, you mentioned
The timelines.
the time frame
Yes.
on when this is going to happen.
Your opinion of it.
I think that the communication internet from the World Wide Web to now is 25 years. We matured it. We will mature the renewable energy internet across the developed world and much of the developing world within 25 to 35 years, a little longer because of infrastructure questions. But I think about the same time frame, 25 to 35 years, and same with the transport and logistics internet. And that means that somewhere around 2050, we should be in a juvenile Internet of Things, globally connected third industrial revolution world. But it isn't we wait till then. As soon as we start, we have new businesses, we bring employment in, we create new productivity, we increase our efficiency, and we reduce our ecological footprint. So the beginning of the process already moves us to where we need to go. So I hope we can get there. For all of you who are parents and grandparents, you know, and have the little children and grandchildren at home, we need to make sure Germany does this for the next generation, and then the whole world does this for the next generation. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you.